The first thing I heard that morning wasn't birds or the soft lap of water against the dock. It was an engine, a big one, growling like some hungry steel beast that didn't belong anywhere near my quiet little cabin. I stepped outside with my coffee still steaming in my hand and froze. There, parked in my gravel drive, was a flatbed with a yellow backhoe chained to it. Its hydraulic arm folded in like a praying mantis about to strike. A man in a neon vest and hard hat hopped down from the cab, his boots crunching on my driveway like they owned the place. He carried a clipboard, held it like a weapon. "Tom Weller?" he grunted. "That's me," I said. He pointed the clipboard at my boathouse like he was marking a target. "We got orders to demolish. Unless you've got a certified check for $14,000, this thing comes down today." I blinked. My coffee almost slipped from my hand. "Excuse me?" He didn't blink back, didn't even look at me, just jerked his thumb toward the machine behind him. "That backhoe starts easy." That was it. No discussion, no neighborly smile, just a death sentence for the place I built with my wife, written in diesel fumes and bureaucratic arrogance. I stood there in my slippers, 68 years old, staring at a man who thought a clipboard gave him the right to bulldoze my life. And all I could think was, my coffee wasn't even cold yet. The thing about mornings on the lake is, they're supposed to be quiet. Most days, the loudest sound is the creak of my old dock boards under my slippers, or the gurgle of the percolator on the counter. Sometimes a loon calls out across the water, and I swear it's just nature's way of saying, "Relax, old man. You made it to another sunrise." That's my rhythm. That's what I earned after 40 years of pulling wire through attics and crawling through basements as an electrician. Retirement means you finally get to listen to water instead of alarms, and mist instead of bosses. My cabin isn't much to look at if you're into shiny countertops and manicured lawns. Cedar siding, brown paint that's faded just enough to look like it belongs in the woods. A boathouse at the end of the dock, built with my own two hands and my late wife's patient ones. We hammered those planks together the summer we thought we were invincible. I still remember her hair tied back with a red bandana, sawdust sticking to her cheek. She laughed when I bent every other nail, said I had the muscles but not the aim. She was right, of course. She usually was. Now, every inch of this place is layered with memory. The dent in the kitchen counter from when my son dropped a cast iron pan. The notch carved in the porch railing where my daughter measured how tall she was every June. Even the rickety screen door that slaps shut too hard. That sound is home to me. So, when some guy with a clipboard shows up and tells me all this is just a pile of lumber waiting to be carted off, it doesn't just feel wrong. It feels criminal. But let me rewind a bit, because before the backhoe in my driveway, before the threats and the fines, it started with a piece of paper. 3 days earlier, I stepped out with my coffee and noticed something bright orange nailed to my boathouse door. Not taped, not tucked, nailed. Like someone had staked a claim. The color screamed against the gray morning mist. My stomach tightened as I yanked it down. It was heavy stock paper, official looking, stamped with bold letters across the top. Lakeside Pines Homeowners Association. My first thought was, that can't be right. My property line sits a half-mile outside their precious subdivision. Always has. My grandfather bought this land before half those people were born. I've got the deed in my file cabinet and the survey papers to prove it. I don't belong to their little club. Never voted in their meetings, never wanted their rules about mailbox heights and approved lawn ornaments. Yet, here it was. Final notice. Unpaid HOA dues, demolition scheduled. The bill? $14,820. Real specific. Real official. Like they had a calculator that printed out intimidation. And the so-called violations. Non-compliant dock maintenance. Unapproved siding color. Improper yard lighting. I almost laughed. The dock they claimed was non-compliant was the same one I replanked last summer, sweating through 90-degree heat, proud as hell when it was done. As for the siding, Ellen and I painted it 30 years ago. Apparently, nostalgia now carried a fine of $10,000. At first I thought, okay, clerical mistake, happens all the time. Someone clicked the wrong lot number on a map. Maybe the notice was meant for one of the lakeside folks down the road, the ones who actually pay into this nonsense. So I called the number on the paper, Figured I'd get some frazzle secretary, straighten it out, and be back to fishing before lunch. Instead, I got Mara Kessler, president of the Lakeside Pines HOA. Her voice came through the line smooth as butter and twice as greasy. "Oh, Mr. Weller," she purred, like she already had me filed under troublemaker. "Yes, I see your account right here. Looks like you're several months behind on your dues." I told her politely that was impossible because, I'll say it again, I don't belong to their damn HOA. My land isn't part of it. County plat map proves it. She made a little tutting noise, like I'd just forgotten to take out the trash. "Well, our records show your parcel was annexed 2 months ago. The community voted. I'm sure you received the paperwork." Annexed, community vote. It sounded rehearsed, slippery. Still, she promised to flag it as a possible clerical error. Her tone was syrupy, all reassurance on the surface. But underneath, I heard it. That smug little hum people get when they think they own you. I hung up uneasy. Told myself it was fixed. A mistake in the system, nothing more. I should have trusted my gut. The next morning, I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when I heard it. Not the birds, not the wind in the trees. A low, grinding rumble, heavy, mechanical. I shuffled to the front window and my heart dropped. Parked where my gravel drive meets the road was a dual-axle flatbed truck. On its back, a yellow backhoe gleamed in the sun like it was licking its chops. This wasn't a neighbor's pickup. This was something different, something final. The driver's door creaked open and a man climbed down. Big guy, broad shoulders, a belly pressing against the reflective vest. Hard hat, tilted low like he wanted to hide his eyes. He carried a clipboard tucked under one arm, the way a soldier might carry a rifle. He didn't knock, just trudged straight up my porch steps. "Can I help you?" I asked, though my voice didn't sound steady even to me. He looked at the clipboard, then at me, finally spoke in a gravelly voice. "You Tom Weller?" "I am." He gave the faintest nod. "Ted, foreman with Kruger Demolition." He tapped the board like it was gospel. "Work order says we tear down that boathouse. If the site isn't cleared, we start on the main cabin." I just stared at him. My brain stuttered. "There's a mistake," I said finally. "I called yesterday. Your HOA secretary said it was all being handled." Ted, if that was even his real name, shifted his weight, still not meeting my eyes. "Mister, I don't know anything about that. All I know is we were told to be here at sunup. The order says either you give me a certified check for 12 grand or we start ripping." He jerked his thumb toward the backhoe. "And that thing starts easy." The words hung there, heavier than the diesel fumes wafting off his truck. That's when I understood. The sugary phone call yesterday wasn't reassurance. It was stalling. Mara hadn't flagged anything. She'd sicked these guys on me while I was still believing in clerical errors. I could have argued. Could have yelled, begged, maybe even tried to block the way with my scrawny frame. But the truth was right in front of me. Ted wasn't the villain here. He was just the wrench. The real hand twisting it belonged to Mara and her merry little band of HOA tyrants. So I nodded slowly, as calm as I could. "All right," I said. My voice sounded dry, like sandpaper. "Let me make a phone call." I turned, stepped inside, and locked the deadbolt. The click echoed louder than the engine outside. My hands were trembling, not from fear, well, maybe partly, but from rage. They thought they could corner me. Paper notices, fake votes, demolition crews. If Mara believed I was some lonely old man with no fight left in him, she was about to be educated. I went straight for the phone, dialed a number I hadn't used in months. My oldest, Dana, picked up on the first ring. "Dad, you okay?" Her voice was sharp, professional, not the soft tone she used on holidays. I laid it out. The orange notice, the syrupy phone call, and now a backhoe parked 20 feet from my porch. She didn't interrupt, just listened. And when I was done, there was a beat of silence, the kind that weighs more than words. Then her tone shifted. No longer just my daughter. This was Special Agent Weller talking. "Dad, listen carefully. Do not go back outside. Don't argue. Don't say another word to them. Go to every window. Take photos. Truck, backhoe, license plates, the man if you can get him. Then pull your deed, your tax bill, your old survey. Photograph everything. Email it to me now. I swallowed. All right. Then get in your car and drive to the county clerk's office. Ask for a certified copy of the official plat map. Pay the fee. That piece of paper is your shield. Do you understand? Yes, I said, voice steadier now. Good. Do it. I'll call you back. Love you, Dad. The line clicked. I stood there for a long second, phone still in my hand, feeling the shift. Fear was still there, sure. But it had company now. Focus. They thought they were pushing a defenseless old man. Instead, they'd just poked the one family that knows how to fight back. If I thought the backhoe in my driveway was bad, I was wrong. That was just the warm-up act. The real show started the next morning. I opened my front door, coffee in hand, and nearly tripped over a white envelope shoved through my mail slot. No stamp, no postmark, hand-delivered like a ransom note. Lakeside Pines, HOA. Second notice. The bill doubled. The original $14,000 was crossed out, replaced with $23,480.52. Apparently, my cabin was now in violation of the approved exterior paint code. The same soft brown paint that had been on these walls for 3 decades suddenly carried a $10,000 fine. I almost laughed. Almost. But the sound caught in my throat. It wasn't funny. It was war by paperwork. That was just the beginning. By noon, a rumble shook the gravel again. I ran to the window half expecting another demolition crew. Instead, a massive 30-yard dumpster dropped onto the end of my driveway. Rusty, red, ugly, with property of Lakeside Pines spray-painted on the side. It blocked everything. My car couldn't get out. No ambulance, no fire truck could get in. They hadn't just delivered a dumpster, they'd delivered a cage. The driver hopped back in his truck, didn't so much as glance at me, and peeled away. I stood there, gripping my coffee mug so hard I thought it might shatter. Not an hour later, my phone buzzed. A neighbor down the road, Bill, called, his voice low, almost guilty. Tom, they just posted on Facebook. You better see this. I pulled up the Lakeside Pines HOA page, and there it was, right at the top of the feed. A photo of my cabin, taken with a telephoto lens from God knows where. Underneath, in bold block letters, Notice of Violation, Non-Compliant Property. Owner, Thomas Weller. They'd tagged me by name. It was public shaming, 21st century style. A digital pillory. They wanted the whole town to believe I was the stubborn old man who refused to follow the rules. For a minute, I just stared at the screen. My blood pressure ticked up with every comment that popped below the post. Little snide remarks from HOA loyalists. Some people think they're above the law. About time that eyesore got dealt with. Then something strange happened. A message notification popped. It was Cheryl, a woman who lived a few houses deeper into Lakeside Pines. They fined me $500 last month, she wrote, because my garden gnome wasn't in harmony with the natural woodland setting. I thought I was the only one. Bill messaged again. They hit me for $200 over a bird feeder. I paid it just to shut them up. The cracks in Mara's little empire were showing. Neighbors who'd been too scared or embarrassed to speak up suddenly found courage once they saw me being dragged through the mud. Still, it didn't change the fact that right outside my window was a dumpster the size of a battleship, cutting me off from the world. Anne parked half hidden up the road. A guy with a camera, lens pointed straight at my windows. It was harassment, plain and simple. I did what Dana told me, documented everything. Photos from every angle, time-stamped, notes scribbled in my phone. 7:14 a.m., dumpster delivered. License plate, Illinois, 8K, 3-27F. I even wrote down the graffiti on the side, property of Lakeside Pines, because someday, in a courtroom, those words would hang like a noose around Mara's neck. That night, sitting in the dark with the glow of my phone lighting up my face, I realized something. They weren't trying to collect money. They weren't trying to fix violations. They were trying to break me, make me so boxed in, so humiliated, so exhausted that I'd finally do what Mara wanted all along. Sell. Sell the land my grandfather bought. Sell the cabin I built with Ellen. Sell my memories like they were just inventory on a shelf. And if she thought I'd roll over that easy, she didn't know me. It happened on a Saturday. I'd driven into town for hardware, nothing dramatic, just nails, screws, the kind of odds and ends an old man likes to have on hand so he can keep tinkering. 2 hours tops. When I turned back onto the road leading down to the lake, I heard it before I saw it. A buzzing, high-pitched, angry, the kind of sound that makes the hair on your arms stand up. A chainsaw. My gut tightened. I floored the accelerator. Gravel spit from under my tires as I barreled down the last bend. And then I saw it. Where my boathouse had stood for 30 years, stood like a stubborn old soldier through storms, floods, winters so cold the lake froze solid. There was nothing but splinters, a heap of cedar planks, nails sticking out like broken bones. And standing on top of it, like a king surveying his conquest, was Ted the foreman. Chainsaw still buzzing in his hand, his crew hauling off pieces of my life like it was just scrap lumber. I slammed the car door and stumbled toward them. My legs felt like water. My voice cracked when it came out. "What the hell have you done?" Ted wouldn't meet my eyes. He clicked off the chainsaw, barked an order at his men, and started loading the last pieces onto the flatbed. I staggered closer, heart pounding. That boathouse wasn't just wood. It was Ellen's laughter echoing as we painted the walls. It was the little window she insisted on because it caught the morning sun. It was nights with my kids, fishing poles stacked in the corner, the smell of damp cedar and hope. And now it was rubble. Ted finally muttered, "Orders." His face was gray, like maybe even he knew this wasn't right, but he didn't stop, didn't apologize, just signaled his men to move faster. I stood there, helpless, while they finished the job. And then, because apparently destruction wasn't enough, another truck pulled in. Smaller, a beat-up pickup. A young guy hopped out smirking. He had the same jawline as Mara, nephew maybe. He didn't even bother with pretense. Just started loading the best pieces of cedar onto his truck. I yelled, "That's mine!" He shrugged. "Salvage." Tossed a plank onto his pile like he was doing me a favor. They weren't just demolishing my boathouse. They were looting it, picking the bones clean. By the time the trucks pulled away, there was nothing left but a raw scar on the dock and a few scattered nails glinting in the dirt. I sank onto the edge of what used to be my dock, staring at the empty space where decades of memories had stood. And that's when I saw it. Half buried under a splintered board, there was a photo, small, worn at the edges. I pulled it free with shaking hands. It was Ellen and me, the summer we finished building the boathouse. She had sawdust in her hair, a hammer in her hand, and the kind of smile that could light up a county fair. My arm was around her shoulders. We looked like two kids who thought they'd just built the Taj Mahal. I held that photo, staring at the wreckage, and something inside me cracked. Not the loud kind of break. Not rage or shouting. A quiet, heavy collapse. The fight drained right out of me. All the documenting, the phone calls, the letters. It suddenly felt like sand slipping through my fingers. Because no matter what evidence I had, no matter what justice eventually came, the boathouse was gone. The place where Ellen and I had carved our life into wood and nails had been erased in 2 hours of chainsaw noise and diesel fumes. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough that the sun slid behind the trees and the air cooled, long enough for my neighbor Bill to jog down the road, breathless. "Tom," he panted, eyes wide with guilt, "I'm so sorry. We called the sheriff, but they were done before he got here. They worked so fast. And Tom?" He swallowed hard. After the crew left, another truck came, Mara's nephew. He took all the good lumber, said it was salvage. I nodded numbly, still holding the photo. Words felt pointless. Bill put a hand on my shoulder. I wish we'd stopped them." I couldn't answer, couldn't even look at him. Because in that moment, I wasn't the stubborn old man ready to fight anymore. I was just a widower, sitting in the ruins of his past, clutching a photo of the woman who'd made this place a home. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like they'd won. I don't remember walking back to the cabin that night. Just know I ended up sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, staring at the photo of Ellen and me, the smell of sawdust still clinging to my clothes. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I heard was tires crunching on the gravel drive. For a split second, my stomach lurched. I thought it was another truckload of HOA goons coming to finish the job. But then headlights swung across the wall, and I knew that car. It was Ellen's. She stepped through the door like she owned the place, which, for the record, she does, and stopped when she saw me slumped over the table. Her eyes flicked to the pile of notices, the photos of the wreckage on my phone, then back to me. Tom. One word, flat, steady, not sympathy, not shock, just that calm tone of hers that always meant someone's about to regret their life choices. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened. All I could manage was, "They took it, Elle. They tore it down." She crossed the room, put a hand on my shoulder. "The boathouse?" I nodded. Her jaw tightened. Ellen isn't one for theatrics. She doesn't rant, doesn't curse. But the silence around her can get so heavy, you swear the air itself is bracing for impact. Then, as if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Not polite, sharp, demanding. I opened it, and there she was, Mara Kessler herself, HOA president, Queen Bee of Lakeside Pines, wearing a blazer like she was about to host a garden club meeting instead of leading a personal crusade. Behind her stood the nephew of hers, the one who'd looted my cedar. "Well, well," Mara said, smiling thin as a knife. "Mr. Weller, still refusing to comply? Shame about that old shack down by the dock, but rules are rules." I gripped the doorframe. "That wasn't a shack. That was my wife's—" "Oh, spare me," she cut in, waving a manicured hand. "You people think sentiment is a defense. It isn't. This community has standards." Her gaze slid past me, into the kitchen, where Ellen now stood in the shadows. Mara cocked her head. "And who might you be? Another relative squatting on non-compliant property?" I opened my mouth, but Ellen stepped forward before I could speak. Calm. Controlled. "My name is Ellen Weller," she said evenly. "I'm Tom's wife." Mara gave a little laugh, the kind people use when they think they've already won. "Well then, Mrs. Weller, perhaps you can talk some sense into your husband. Pay the fines or pack up. Those are the options." Ellen tilted her head, studying her like a hawk studies a mouse. Then she set her leather bag on the table, unzipped it, and pulled out a slim black wallet. She flipped it open. The gold seal of the state of Illinois gleamed in the porch light. County Judge, Honorable Ellen Weller. Mara's smug smile faltered. What is this?" Ellen's voice never rose, never cracked, just cut through the night with surgical precision. "It means you've made a mistake, Ms. Kessler. A serious one. You think a forged vote and a doctored plat map make you the law? They don't. I am the law here. And as of this moment, your game is over." The nephew actually stepped back, like the badge itself burned his eyes. Mara tried to recover, straightened her blazer, forced a smirk. "Judge or not, this is an HOA matter, internal governance, beyond your jurisdiction." Ellen took one measured step closer, her heels clicking like a gavel strike. "You trespassed on my property. You ordered the destruction of private structures. You looted personal belongings. That makes it very much my jurisdiction. And you know what we call that in my courtroom? Criminal." For the first time, Mara looked rattled. Her eyes darted to the nephew, to me, then back to Ellen. You can't prove." "Oh, we will," Ellen cut in smoothly. "You left a trail a mile wide, notices with no postal marks, forged signatures from dead neighbors, and a nice, fat slush fund hidden in the books. You're not just overreaching, Ms. Kessler. You're embezzling, extorting, and that ends now." Silence. Only the crickets outside dared make a sound. I just stood there, watching my wife dismantle Mara with nothing but words and a piece of leather holding her badge. For the first time in weeks, my chest loosened. Finally, Ellen snapped her wallet shut. "You have 24 hours to cease all actions against this property. After that, the sheriff, the state attorney, and possibly the FBI will be involved. And trust me, they'll find your little operation fascinating." Mara swallowed. Her bravado cracked just for a second. Then she spun on her heel, muttering something under her breath, and stalked off into the night. Her nephew trailed behind, suddenly a lot less cocky with his truck full of stolen cedar. When the gravel finally stopped crunching under their tires, Ellen turned back to me. Her face softened just a fraction. "You okay?" she asked. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I was ready to give up, Elle. Thought they'd beaten me." Her hand brushed mine. "Not while I'm here." And just like that, the ground shifted. They'd torn down my boathouse. They'd humiliated me. But now they were up against something bigger than an old man and his memories. Now they were up against my wife, the judge. The morning after Ellen put the fear of God and the Illinois State Court into Mara Kessler, I expected quiet, maybe even retreat. Instead, what I got was a phone call. "Tom?" The voice was shaky, hesitant. "This is Cheryl, from Lakeside Pines. I saw what they did to your boathouse, and I think I need to talk to you." I'd barely hung up when the doorbell rang. Bill stood there, cap in hand, looking like a man about to confess to a crime. Behind him was a younger guy I didn't recognize, carrying a folder thick enough to choke a filing cabinet. "Mind if we come in?" Bill asked. I looked at Ellen. She gave a small nod. So, I stepped aside. We sat around the kitchen table, the same table my kids had once spread their homework on, the same one Ellen had turned into her legal war room the night before. Bill cleared his throat. "Tom, I should have said something sooner, about Mara, about the HOA, you and me both," I muttered. Cheryl arrived a few minutes later, clutching a manila envelope like it was radioactive. She slid into a chair, cheeks flushed. "They fined me for my garden gnome," she said, voice trembling. $500, said it wasn't woodland appropriate. Then when I complained, they added another fine, said my welcome mat was half an inch too wide. The young guy finally spoke up. "They got me for my kid's tricycle, said the color clashed with the aesthetic guidelines." He shook his head. "It's a tricycle, red plastic, cost $30 at Walmart. Mara slapped me with a $750 fine." I stared at him. "For a tricycle?" He nodded grimly. Ellen leaned forward, her judge face on. "And you have the paperwork to prove these fines?" They exchanged glances, then each slid their envelopes across the table. Ellen opened them with the precision of a surgeon. Inside were notices stamped with the HOA logo, full of bogus violations and absurd fees. Every page reeked of overreach. She spread them out like cards in a poker hand, her eyes scanning faster than I could follow. "These aren't just arbitrary fines," she said finally. "They're a pattern, a deliberate campaign to pressure homeowners into paying or selling. Classic harassment by regulation." Bill nodded, looking miserable. "That's the thing, Tom. People have sold. 3 families this past year. Got so tired of fighting, they packed up and left. Mara's nephew scooped up 2 of those houses. Dirt cheap." Something clicked in my chest. This wasn't about lawn ornaments or paint colors. It was about land, waterfront land. Mara wasn't running an HOA. She was running a racket. I leaned back, let out a low whistle. "So that's the game. Bleed us with fines, box us in with dumpsters, shame us online until we cave. Then her family buys up the land." The young guy slammed his hand against the table. "Exactly. My neighbor sold for half what his place was worth. And guess who moved in 2 weeks later? Mara's brother." Ellen tapped her pen against the stack of papers, her expression grim but controlled. "We can work with this. These aren't just complaints anymore. They're evidence." For the next 2 hours, our cabin turned into something between a legal office and a resistance cell. Ellen set up her laptop at the head of the table. Bill pulled out property records he'd photocopied from the county clerk's office. Cheryl spread out her fines in neat rows, color-coded with sticky notes. The young guy, his name was Kevin, produced screenshots of HOA Facebook posts where neighbors had been shamed, ridiculed, even threatened. The pile grew higher by the minute. Every story was worse than the last. One woman fined because her shutters were painted sunset red instead of rust brown. An elderly couple dinged for leaving their trash can visible on collection day because they'd forgotten to bring it back in before 5 p.m. A single mom threatened with lien papers after she put up a basketball hoop for her kids. It was extortion dressed up as community standards. At one point, Ellen leaned back and sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "This isn't an HOA anymore. It's organized fraud." I looked at Bill, at Cheryl, at Kevin. Their faces were tight, angry, but also relieved, because for the first time, someone was calling it what it was. Not strict rules, not unfortunate misunderstandings. Fraud. By afternoon, the kitchen table was a minefield of evidence. Forged notices, fake votes, bogus fines, financial irregularities. Ellen was already tracing through the HOA's so-called budget. I couldn't help but smirk. You know, Elle, this looks less like a meeting and more like the early stages of a RICO case. She shot me a look, the kind of look that says, don't joke while I'm building a firing squad. Then, to my surprise, she actually smiled. Maybe it is. Bill let out a low chuckle. I gotta admit, Tom, seeing her squirm last night, that was the first time I thought Mara might actually get what's coming to her. Cheryl nodded. We've all been scared of her for so long. She finds us, she humiliates us, she makes us feel small, but she can't find a judge. Exactly, Ellen said, voice firm. She's been playing her own rules. Now we play by the real ones. By dusk, the little alliance was sealed. Bill offered to canvass the neighborhood, see who else was fed up enough to speak. Cheryl volunteered to collect testimonies. Kevin promised to dig up more screenshots. When they left, arms full of paperwork and determination, the air in the cabin felt different. Lighter, stronger. I sat back in my chair, looking at Ellen. You've turned my kitchen table into a courthouse. She didn't even look up from her laptop. Good, because by the time I'm done, this house won't just be your home. It'll be Exhibit A. For the first time since the boathouse came down, I felt something stir in me again. Hope. Not the naive kind. Not the quiet kind. The kind that comes when you realize the bully who's been pushing everyone around just picked a fight with the wrong family. Ellen always said bullies have one fatal flaw. They can't help themselves. They push because they need to push. So we decided to use that against her. It started with a lumber delivery, just a dozen 2x4s and a sheet of plywood from the hardware store. Not enough to build anything real, but enough to make it look like I was starting to rebuild the boathouse. I stacked the boards neatly at the end of the dock, right on the scar where the old boathouse had stood. From the road, it looked like construction had begun. From a telephoto lens, it looked like bait. Next came the plans. One rainy afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with a pencil and a ruler, sketching out the most official-looking blueprints I could muster. I even scribbled notes in the margins. Reinforced foundation. Exceeds county code. New decking. Ellen propped the drawings up in the garage window, angled just right so anyone snooping around could see them. Think she'll bite? I asked. Ellen didn't even look up from her laptop. She won't be able to help herself. Of course, bait doesn't work without eyes on it. That's where my son, Ray, came in. Homeland Security had trained him well. He could hide a camera in a birdhouse and make it look like it belonged in a Pottery Barn catalog. He placed 4 around the property. 1 inside a birdhouse overlooking the dock. 1 under the eave of the garage, aimed straight at the window with the decoy plans. Another tucked into the hedge line where she'd have to cross to snoop. And the last inside the cabin, peering out the back window with a wide-angle view. All motion activated, all streaming live to Ellen's laptop and Ray's phone. We'll know the second she sets foot on your land, Ray said, tucking his phone into his jacket like it was a holster. The waiting was the hardest part. 2 days passed. Nothing. Just squirrels tripping the sensors, Bill's golden retriever sniffing around, the UPS driver delivering a box of coffee filters. Every time the alert pinged, our heads snapped up, only to deflate again. By the 3rd day, I started to doubt. Maybe Mara had already gotten what she wanted. Maybe destroying the boathouse was her grand finale. Then, at 11:37 a.m., Ray's phone buzzed. He held it up, and my stomach flipped. There she was. Mara Kessler, in her pressed slacks and HOA logo collared shirt, striding down my driveway like she was queen of the county. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. She marched straight to the dock, snapping photos of the stacked lumber. Then she turned toward the garage, eyes narrowing at the sight of the blueprints. "She's on the hook," Ray muttered. We watched the feed in silence. Mara leaned in close to the garage window, phone raised, snapping pictures. She craned her neck, trying to see every detail of my plans. And then, just as she pressed her face near the glass, tires crunched on the gravel. Not 1 car, 2. 2 black SUVs rolled down the drive, silent and deliberate, boxing her in before she even knew they were there. Mara spun around, eyes wide, as the doors swung open and 3 agents stepped out, all dark suits and efficiency. Ellen followed, calm as ever, her blue jacket plain, but carrying more weight than any badge of Mara's ever could. From my kitchen window, I saw it. The exact moment Mara realized she wasn't the hunter anymore. She was the prey. From the kitchen window, I saw Mara freeze. Her clipboard slipped just a little in her hand. That smug HOA smile, the one she wore like armor, cracked at the edges. The agents fanned out, silent and efficient. One at the dock, one by the garage, one blocking her path back to the road. And then Ellen stepped forward. She didn't rush, didn't bark, just walked up steady, heels crunching on gravel, every step landing like a gavel strike. "Ma'am," she said, voice cool as lake mist, "while you are currently trespassing on my husband's property, that's the least of your problems today." Mara blinked, her lips parted, and for once she didn't have a rehearsed line ready. This is outrageous. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. You can't..." Ellen flipped her credentials open, holding them steady. The gold seal caught the sunlight. "Honorable Judge Ellen Weller, and yes, I can." Mara's face went pale, then red. You're his wife? This is a conflict of interest, an abuse of power." Ellen didn't even flinch. What's abuse of power is forging property maps, fabricating votes from dead neighbors, and ordering armed crews to destroy homes you don't own. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a blade. "You didn't just bully the wrong man, you committed crimes, and now, Ms. Kessler, you're about to face the consequences." Behind them, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Not a deputy, the sheriff himself. He stepped out holding a thick folder, papers clipped tight, deputies at his side. Search warrants. The sight drained the last of Mara's bravado. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, voice rising. "You people are making a mistake. I am the law here." Ellen's eyes narrowed. She didn't shout, didn't sneer, just delivered the final nail. "No, Mara, you were never the law. You were a petty tyrant with a clipboard." The sheriff handed her the papers. "Search warrants signed this morning for your home and your HOA office." Mara's hand shook as she tried to shove them back. "This won't stand. I have rights." "Of course you do," Ellen said smoothly. She pulled a folded card from her jacket pocket. The Miranda script burned into every syllable. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." The words echoed across the dock. Mara's face crumpled. The agents moved in. Cold metal clicked around her wrists. The sound was louder than the backhoe that had once rumbled in my driveway. Handcuffs. Her nephew, standing useless at the road's edge, tried to protest. "You can't just..." The sheriff cut him off. "Son, step aside unless you'd like to join her." He stepped aside, and just like that, the queen bee of Lakeside Pines was marched off my property, her clipboard dangling useless in one cuffed hand. For a long moment, I just stood at the window, watching, breathing. Weeks of dread, of fines, of humiliation, it all drained out of me in a single exhale. Ellen turned back, caught my eye through the glass. She didn't smile, not yet, but the tiniest flicker in her eyes said, "It's over. We've got her." That night, our cabin was quiet again. No dumpsters blocking the drive, no cameras hidden in the trees, no demolition crews humming engines outside my door. Just quiet. The kind of quiet I'd almost forgotten existed. I sat on the porch with Ellen, the lake dark and still, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed it. We'd won the battle. The war, the courtroom, the hearings, the fallout was still ahead. But Mara's empire had cracked wide open, and she hadn't just lost her grip. She'd lost everything. The morning after Mara was led off my dock in handcuffs, the county felt different. For the first time in weeks, I drank my coffee without flinching at the sound of engines or footsteps. No orange notices nailed to my door, no dumpster blocking my driveway. Just quiet. But Ellen reminded me that quiet wasn't the same as finished. An arrest was only the first step. The real victory would come in court. 3 months later, I found myself sitting in a courtroom that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. Mara sat across the aisle, no longer dressed in her tidy blazers and HOA logo shirts, but in an orange jumpsuit that clashed with her skin. The woman who once strutted around Lakeside Pines with a clipboard now looked like she'd been clipped herself. Her lawyer shuffled papers like he knew he was holding a losing hand. When the judge entered, the room hushed. Not Ellen, of course. She couldn't preside. But one of her colleagues, a woman with steel gray hair and the kind of stare that could turn granite into gravel. She looked like she'd rather be anywhere else than hearing about HOA violations, which was good. She wasn't about to take Mara's nonsense. The prosecution built the case brick by brick. First came the altered plat maps, the original clean boundary lines the county had recorded years ago. Then Mara's doctored version, filed 6 weeks later, where the HOA's reach magically swallowed my property whole. A cartographer pointed out the subtle bend, that neat little curve designed to steal my land with the stroke of a pen. Next came the so-called community vote, a single sheet with a dozen signatures. Except half the names were ghosts. Frank Miller, dead since 2018. Joan Peterson, gone in 2020. Carl Beasley, living happily in Florida for the past decade. Each name highlighted in yellow, each one a nail in Mara's coffin. Then the demolition order. Ted the foreman took the stand, eyes down, voice flat. He admitted they tore down my boathouse, claimed the paperwork looked official, that he was just following orders. When pressed on who gave those orders, he muttered Mara's name. Her lawyer jumped up, objecting like his life depended on it, but the judge swatted him down with one word: overruled. The real dagger came when my son, Mark, the postal inspector, introduced the emails pulled from Mara's laptop. The jury read one in silence, and you could feel the air thicken. The old man on the lake called. He knows the deed. Stall him. We need to make him sell before he figures it out. Don't worry about the law. We are the law here. That single line did more damage than any chainsaw ever could. But Ellen wasn't finished. Called as a witness, she laid out the HOA's finances like a surgeon opening a body on the table. Over $500,000 collected from homeowners in 5 years. Landscaping and snow removal accounting for maybe half. The rest funneled into one line item: Jansen Contracting. No invoices, no receipts. Just quarterly checks signed by Mara herself. And when Ellen explained that Jansen Contracting was a shell company owned by Mara's brother, the jury's eyes widened. The racket was out in the open. Mara's lawyer sputtered and waved his arms like a drowning man, calling it circumstantial. The judge leaned forward, gave him a look sharp enough to draw blood, and warned him to sit down unless he wanted contempt of court added to his resume. By the time the prosecutor rested, it wasn't a question of guilt. It was a matter of how long the jury would take to say the word. The answer: 4 hours. Guilty, on conspiracy, on wire fraud, on extortion. Her treasurer, Greg Purcell, had already folded like a cheap lawn chair, testifying that Mara had directed everything, even down to the hand-delivered notices, designed specifically to dodge federal mail fraud. The judge didn't hold back. 12 years in state prison. Restitution of $64,000 to me, personally, for harassment and distress. Full reconstruction of the boathouse, funded not by HOA coffers, but by Mara's own assets. And the coup de grace. Immediate dissolution of the Lakeside Pines HOA. Its charter revoked, its power stripped away. The gavel cracked, sharp and final. Mara slumped in her chair, her empire of forged signatures and bogus fines crumbling into dust. Walking out of that courthouse, the air tasted new. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to shook my hand, clapped my back, even cried. Bill laughed like a man who'd finally seen daylight after years underground. Cheryl wept, not out of sadness but relief. Kevin stood taller than he had before. And me? I just stood on the courthouse steps with Ellen, breathing in like a man who'd been underwater too long. They had torn down my boathouse, but now the law had torn down theirs. A month after the verdict, my driveway was filled with a very different kind of truck. Not a demolition rig or a dumpster, but a flatbed loaded with fresh cedar planks, their scent sharp and clean, like hope itself. The driver climbed down, cheerful, handed me a clipboard to sign. It was the first clipboard in months that didn't make me want to punch someone. Neighbors started showing up not long after. Bill with a tool belt slung around his waist. Cheryl carrying a box of donuts and more determination than I'd ever seen in her eyes. Kevin arrived balancing a stack of paint cans and a grin that said he'd been waiting for this day. Even a few others I hadn't expected. Quiet folks who had never spoken up during Mara's reign wandered down with hammers, saws, and casseroles. We didn't call it a rebuilding party, but that's what it was. There was laughter, sawdust, the clink of nails being driven home. Every board that went up felt like a line of defense being rebuilt, not just for me, but for everyone who'd been pushed around. I hammered alongside Bill, both of us sweating under the noon sun. "You know," he said between swings, "for the first time in years, I don't feel like I have to look over my shoulder every time I plant a tree. It's freeing." I just nodded. Words weren't enough to describe the relief. Cheryl painted trim in silence for a while, then muttered, "I thought I was crazy. I thought maybe I was the problem, the way Mara made me feel. Turns out it wasn't me at all. It was her." She smiled faintly, dipping her brush again. "Feels good to paint something that isn't followed by a fine." Even kids were there. Kevin's little boy pedaled up on the same red tricycle that had once been declared non-compliant. This time, nobody fined him. Instead, someone cheered him on, and the boy grinned like he owned the place. Piece by piece, the boathouse rose again, stronger, cleaner, built not just with wood, but with hands and hearts that had been beaten down and now finally stood tall. By Sunday evening, the frame was finished, the roof nailed down, and the smell of grilled burgers mixed with cedar in the air. We ate together at long tables on the grass, a makeshift feast under the fading light. Bill raised a paper cup of soda like it was fine champagne. "To Tom," he said, voice loud enough for everyone to hear, and to Ellen, for showing us that rules aren't the same as justice. The group cheered. I didn't have the words, so I just lifted my cup back, my throat tight. It wasn't just about a boathouse anymore. It was about belonging, about reminding ourselves that people are stronger than paper, that communities aren't built by fines and threats, but by neighbors willing to show up with a hammer or a casserole. The ripples went further than our little stretch of lakeshore. A month later, the county commissioners held a meeting. Ellen and I sat in the front row as the board voted unanimously to require mandatory independent audits for every HOA in the county every 2 years. Transparency, oversight, accountability. Words that had been missing for far too long. Mara's downfall had forced their hand, and no other community would suffer the same silent theft again. When the vote passed, the room erupted in applause. For once, I didn't just feel like a homeowner on the edge of someone else's map. I felt like part of something larger, something better. Back at the lake, the mist returned, curling low over the water in the early mornings. I'd stand on the dock with my coffee, breathing it in, the new cedar of the boathouse glowing pale against the horizon. It wasn't exactly the same as before. How could it be? The original carried 30 years of memories with Sarah, and no new wood could replace that. But this new one carried something different. It carried proof. Proof that people can fight back. Proof that you don't have to fold when someone with a fake rulebook tries to strip away what's yours. Proof that even an old man on the lake isn't so easy to push around when he's got truth, family, and one hell of a determined wife on his side. Sometimes I catch myself looking at the framed photograph Ellen found in the rubble, the one of us covered in sawdust all those years ago, smiling proud in front of the first boathouse. Now, it hangs inside the cabin, next to a new picture, the community gathered on the dock, fresh paint still drying, grins wide and defiant. 2 photos, side by side, past and present, loss and rebuilding, grief and victory. When the mist settles low and quiet, I can almost hear Sarah's voice, soft as the water against the pilings. "You did good, Tom." And I whisper back into the morning air, "We did." Because in the end, it wasn't just about saving a cabin or a dock, or even my grandfather's deed. It was about saving the idea that what's yours is yours, that no bully gets to rewrite the truth with a forged map. Gravity can't be voted against. Boundaries can't just be moved because someone wants a prettier view. And justice, real justice, doesn't come from a clipboard. It comes from the law, from people standing together, And sometimes, from a judge who just happens to be your wife. The lake has always been a mirror. On calm mornings, it reflects the trees, the clouds, even me, older, lined, but still standing. On rougher days, it reflects chaos, ripples, storms rolling across the sky. I guess life isn't much different. These days, I find myself back on the dock most mornings, mug in hand, watching the mist creep over the water like an old friend returning. For months, I woke expecting the crunch of tires or the slam of a dumpster, but now the only sound is the gentle lap of water against the pilings. Funny how you don't realize what peace is until it's been stolen and given back again. The boathouse stands new and strong, cedar shining gold when the sun hits it. It doesn't look the same as the one Sarah and I built, but that's all right. The first one held 30 years of our memories. This one holds something else. Resilience. Proof that even when someone tears your world down, you can build it back stronger with the right people beside you. Sometimes I sit out there with Ellen and we don't talk much. She has that calm about her, the kind that judges are born with, or maybe grow into. And I think about the way she read Mara, her rights on this very dock. My wife, the county judge, standing steady while the queen of the HOA crumbled like wet cardboard. If that isn't cosmic justice, I don't know what is. Neighbors still stop by. Bill comes over with fresh tomatoes from his garden. Cheryl waves from the road when she drives by, her gnome proudly sitting in plain sight. Kevin's boy rides that infamous red tricycle and circles around the boathouse. No fines attached. It's the little things that tell you the world has shifted. Fear has a smell, and it used to hang in this community like mildew. Now it's gone, replaced by laughter, by freedom. Sometimes I catch folks asking Ellen quietly how it felt to take down Mara. She always gives the same answer. It wasn't me, it was the truth, and she means it. The trial wasn't just about me or my boathouse. It cracked open a rotten system, exposed the fraud, and forced the county to put new rules in place. Audits, oversight, accountability. 3 words that Mara had never expected to face. There's a satisfaction in knowing her kingdom of fines and forged papers is gone, dismantled piece by piece. I heard she still insists from prison that she was misunderstood, that she only wanted order. But I've walked through the ashes she left behind. Order wasn't what she wanted. She wanted power, and power without honesty rots like wood left too long in the water. One evening, as the sun dropped low and painted the lake orange, Ellen brought out the old photograph we'd salvaged from the wreckage. The one of us when we first built the original boathouse, covered in sawdust, grinning like fools, her holding the hammer, me with my arm around her. She set it on the new shelf inside the cabin, right beside a new photo of the rebuilt dock crowded with neighbors, kids, even Bill's dog. 2 snapshots, decades apart, both telling the same story. We built, we endured, we rebuilt. I think Sarah would have liked that. The county calls me a symbol now, though I don't feel like one. They say my fight set a precedent, that it gave people courage to push back when HOAs overstep. Maybe so. But really, I was just an old man who wanted to drink his coffee in peace without a backhoe in the driveway. When I walk the dock at dusk, I sometimes whisper the same words I did the day it was rebuilt. We did it, not I, because this wasn't a victory won alone. It was Ellen, steady as bedrock. It was my neighbors, tired of being pushed around. It was my kids, ready to fight with evidence and patience instead of fists. The lake reflects it all, the past, the fight, the rebuild. And every morning, when the mist curls low over the water, I remember something Mara never understood. You can't redraw gravity, can't find people into silence, can't forge away the truth. The truth waits, and when it comes like the dawn burning the fog off the water.